Good morning. My name is Bob Stillerman, and I am the pastor at Sardis Baptist Church. And we want to welcome you to this virtual series entitled Capturing the Image of Table. Each Wednesday at noon during the Wednesdays of Lent, we will offer a Zoom gathering where we'll share a few ideas about table and then spend some time in reflection. We realize that 12 o'clock is not always ideal, particularly for working households. So we're also offering this session via Facebook and YouTube. So we hope if you're unable to join us in person, that you can watch the video in these two platforms and use the comments to extend our conversations about table here at Sardis. During this season of Lent, we will journey with Jesus toward Jerusalem and eventually toward the dark Friday of a cross, and even more eventually toward the hope of a Sunday. But we will also journey with Jesus toward a table. Now, some call that table on Maundy Thursday the Last Supper, but we at Sardis choose to remember it as the First Communion. It's the hope of a table that steels us for that dark Friday, and eventually it's the hope of a table that awakens us to Sunday. So again, each Wednesday in Lent, we'll spend some time considering what table means for our community of faith. Let's set today's table by considering some images of table that have happened at Sardis over the past couple of years. At the top left, you can see table in a virtual setting. We used a story hour to engage our toddlers during the early stages of pandemic. Sometimes table is a little less formal. It can be Krispy Kreme donuts and Keurig coffee in the sitting room, or it can be pancakes on Shrove Tuesday. Other times it does take a bit of a more formal shape. In the meeting house monthly, we read the sacred words of institution and we pour the wine and break the bread and remember those words together as community. Sometimes table extends beyond humanity to all the creatures of the world. You see our llama there enjoying a nice snack at an animal blessing from years past. Sometimes table happens in a big group and it happens spontaneously. At the bottom there, you can see our annual trip to the IHOP after our Easter sunrise service. Sometimes the table is all about joy and exuberance, particularly on birthdays. So you see Tilly working on those candles and cupcakes. And then sometimes table takes us back to the transformative places of our history. The bottom left there reflects and honors the Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro for that first sit-in. So that's an idea of some of the tables that exist here at Sardis. So with that in mind, we want to spend some time this morning thinking about the idea of what happens at a table. In other words, what are the verbs and the actions that we can expect when we think about a table coming together? And so the first thing that any table has to have is people who are willing to make space. We have to make space in all of the elements around us to get ready, right? Our hearts, our minds, our homes, even our gardens and pantries and calendars. We have to get ready for fellowship to happen. And then once we're ready, we sort of put that readiness to good use by preparing. So we may cook for the table or clean for the table or organize or follow up or just be ready to be energized and in that right place to be there. So again, that can be anything from creating the place settings to preparing the meal itself to just simply getting in the emotional and physical state of mind to be part of table. I think this third one is really important. We have to gather, and I realize that sounds simple, but we really do. Every time we have a table that is more than one person, it means each participant has to be intentional about the act of coming together. I think another way to say that is when we gather, we're actually pursuing community. And then another thing that happens at the table is that we share. We share the best of who we are and what we have in the present moment. And that can be manifested in a number of ways. We come to the table ready to share what's happening in our lives. We come to the table ready to share what we have prepared. We come to the table ready to share and rest. And then a couple more things about what happened at a table. We come to the table ready to receive, and I think this is another important one. It's not just that we bring things to the table, but sometimes we come to a table as guests. And so when we come to a table as guests and not a host, we come ready to receive what is offered to us, whether that's the meal or the hospitality. And we also come ready to receive the spirit in which those gifts are provided. Another thing that can happen at table is reflection. It's really a chance to sit still and again to be present. And so as we gather in community, we acknowledge that moment that is around us, and we offer gratitude for the many provisions that come our way. Now, of course, the food is probably the most obvious of those things we offer gratitude for. But also we get the chance to offer gratitude for the company that is around us, for God's presence that manifests itself in so many ways. And then, tables are often a place where we can gather meaning from what's happening in life. Thanksgiving is a time when we gather meaning. Just even sitting at the breakfast table with close family and friends and having those deep conversations. Another thing that we do, whether we are intentional or unintentional about it, is once we've completed the verbs and actions of a table, we reset, right? So sometimes it's a matter of just simply cleaning up the kitchen, but we put things back in place, or maybe we leave the cafeteria and go back to our classroom or to our office or to whatever's next. And we scatter and go about our ways. Sometimes that's going home. Again, sometimes that's going back into the routines of the day. But again, it is kind of that reset button and that chance to break the stillness of the day, to come into fellowship, and then to use that energy and exuberance of fellowship to be energized for what's next. And then the last thing that I came up with in terms of what happens at the table is rest. I think if we're doing it right, again, it's a chance to slow our minds and to slow our bodies and to sort of recharge and refuel. And I think sometimes it's also the permission to rest. And so we rest in the idea of friendship. We rest in the idea that we have people around us who care about us, who want to hear what's going on, and who provide safe spaces for us to kind of be present. Again, this idea of fulfillment in being present. When we sit at a table, when we sit in the company of others, it makes us take stock of what's around us. And then finally, just resting in the grace and enoughness of God. Our provisions do abound. Our awareness of God does abound. And so I think finding rest in the strength and the power and the present of every moment. So again, those are 8 actions or verbs that I think happen at the table. I'll roll through them one more time. We make space. We prepare. We gather. We share. We receive. We reflect, we reset, and we rest. So what I want to encourage for our conversation, if you're here on the call today or as you consider it throughout the week, is think about those tables that you've occupied in this past week. And what kind of table verbs did you recognize? Or are there ones beyond this list that come to mind? But again, I think table is such a vital component of our everyday lives. Sometimes we think it's ordinary, and there's really some extraordinary things that are happening I think if we're intentional about the actions that happen at our tables, we have the opportunity to model, especially those positive actions, over and over again throughout the week. And then as you think about those verbs or actions that have happened at your tables, which ones do you think were the most important? And again, I think that's a question that will be answered differently depending on who answers. We all come to the table needing different things. So what was that important thing that you were seeking this week? And then maybe on the opposite end of the spectrum, what was the least important thing at the table for you? Maybe it was a nice to have, maybe it wasn't the food itself that was important. Maybe it was just the opportunity to be around other people and hear what was happening beyond your own circle. So again, as we move into this first week of Lent and think about ultimately what our first communion will look like in 6 or 7 weeks, what are the things that are happening at your tables? What do you want to mimic? What do you want to set down? What's important and what's not important? I think these are really good questions for us to consider as we move into this Lenten journey. And let me simply close by saying, I hope that the tables that you find in the week ahead will offer rest, will offer a sense of empowerment, but most especially will be a place where God's presence and God's power are realized and manifested for you. Have a great week.